We're going to let you know which rule in football needs to be changed. Hit the bell button if you've already subscribed. Go on, boss.
I was just reading. I'll just quietly sit here. Red mate.
Red mate.
All right, and we're sitting together yet again for another little episode.
Yes, Chris.
The robotic man over here in the corner. We're going to try and make this one a quick one. We're going to go for what one rule in football would you like to see changed? Before we get into the video...
Hit the subscribe button. And I used to think about the bell.
If you haven't already tapped the notification bell, make sure you have done so to alert you to any drops we've got coming up. As always, a little like on the video would do us a good little favour as well. So, getting into this one, what one rule within football, Ant, would you like to see changed?
For me, I think the biggest thing that's a bit of a hot topic now over the last few years is the introduction of VAR. I think there's so many people pro-VAR, a lot of people anti-VAR.
Ant-VAR?
Anti-VAR. That's like ant-VAR.
I'm doing VAR. You are on the VAR. That's what needs to be changed. He needs to get
on it. I need to do it. I will be operating VAR, making the calls. For me, I think the whole purpose of bringing it in is to overall clear and obvious errors. So obviously the technology is great that we can see things back and you can look at things where they're offside. But the nature of calls that are made that are clear and obvious errors means that you should be able to see it and go straight away, oh, this is an error, this needs to be overturned. So the nature of a referee and the team watching something and reviewing it, oh, let me just keep watching it, let me see a different angle, let me see another angle of it, oh, let me watch it back a few more times. By definition, this is now no longer clear and obvious. The players on the pitch, they don't know what's going on. So maybe there's a rule whereby you can either like challenge and use it the same way you can in tennis and
like cricket, yeah.
But at the very least, I think whenever you start getting offsides and you draw the lines and when it's taking so much time to assess it, it's showing it's not clear and obvious. So like that's where it just needs to get on with it. There's only a few times in the past where someone's like so far offside that you can go, okay, that goal was clearly offside, that shouldn't have stood, or the referee's made an error there, and it's can't be debated. That's the only time I think you should use it. When you're actually scrutinising every little tackle, looking for contact, oh, this should be a penalty, this should not. Any situation where a referee is watching a video over and over, I think it's hard to argue that that's up for debate.
Yeah, I think the only issue is like VAR is obviously brought in to kind of get rid of those small errors or big errors and make the game as clean as possible from that standpoint. And I guess as a fan or as a supporter, you'd probably feel pretty hard done by if a goal was scored that is offside, no matter how big or small the offside is, but it was just like, oh, it was let go because, we've got the technology in place that could have prevented it, but, we lost the game 1-0 to an offside call. That was wrong.
Definitely. I think, offside is one of those rules where it is black and white, where the player is, there's obviously got the attacker, the defender, you can draw the line. But I think when you start drawing that line and you are looking at like an absolute inch, you are, like you said, that is black and white, that's offside, this is not. But, as a fan when you're watching the game and it's getting slowed down and the linesmen, they are actually really decent at what they do in terms of like the success rate of when they flag it. When your team concedes, you do feel a bit hard done by. You're like, oh, that is offside, it should be overturned. But, when it starts taking ages and ages, for me, like I said already, the whole thing they introduce is clear and obvious. And when you start zooming in, doing all the frames and the lines, to me, by definition, that is not clear and obvious. I'm obviously like happy with VAR in terms of what it does, and it has helped a lot in many ways. So I'm not by any means anti-VAR, but just kind of the use of it and how it's done.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you happy with that?
Well, that's your opinion, isn't it? I've got to be happy with that, I guess.
Yeah, probably the only thing I can think of. Have you got something in mind that you think?
Yeah, for me, the one rule that I'd like to see changed or definitely improved is the handball rule.
Yeah, okay.
I just think
we need to be able to use our hands.
Yeah, pick it up, throw it in the goal. No, too often it's. Well, I think we've done the referees one before. Like, the officiating is done by referees who've never played the game. So often they're calling for handballs. Someone will jump like this and it'll hit their hand and be like, oh, it's in an unnatural position. It's just like, yeah, because they're trying to keep it like close to their body. That's the only unnatural thing. If it was natural, it would be here.
Similar for when like players jump and then their arms are going up to like stabilise themselves, or they're jostling with someone.
Yeah.
Or obviously you throw your arms up to jump to get higher, and then you're coming down. Your arms are going to be up here.
Yeah. Or like you see, like you dive, like stick your leg out for a ball, and all of a sudden, just to counterbalance, your arm slightly comes up, and they're like, "Oh, I was in an unnatural position." It's like, yeah, if you've ever played sport before, you'd realise that you have to do that.
Yeah, otherwise you're falling over.
Yeah. So it's like it's one of these ones. There are clear and obvious, to use that word that you've used so many times, where players will jump up like that and they'll hit their hand, of course. But so often, you'll see shots like players will almost turn their back and it'll just come off their arm. Or the one that always gets me is it'll be like a 50-50. Like two players will come in for the ball at the same time and it'll fly up and touch their arm. People are like, handball. It's just like, there was no way that could be a handball. Like, there was no intent, there was no reason to it, but obviously the ball's moving at such a speed that it's so much quicker than me to be like, oh, it's coming, I need to move that arm out the way now.
Like no one's reaction time is that good that that's deliberate.
Yeah. And there was a while there where they just were like, oh, we'll just take it out, and if the ball hits your hand in the box, it's a penalty. Yeah. And it was just like, well, this rule just is almost the worst of them all.
Because there was just so many penalties in the
penalty. Yeah, and it was just like, oh, where are we going? So for me, the handball rule is the one where I get frustrated as a player and as a supporter, because there's just so much opinion with handball. That is, that isn't. We'll make it this rule, which I guess takes away opinion of if it touches the hand, it is handball, which doesn't work.
I mean, we spoke about, offside. That is like a black and white rule where it's either offside or it's not. You can't really debate it, especially when they draw the line. But the handball rule, as far as I know, it has to be an intentional handball. And that's where the greyness comes in.
Exactly.
Because people are like, oh, that's intentional because, the unnatural position implies it's intentional. And that's when people are like, oh, he's jumped and he looks like he's lifted his arm, he's trying to hit the ball there. Yeah. And that's where the grey area comes in. But I think recently they changed it to where it's above the sleeve is okay, so it can kind of hit your arm here and it's fine. Do you think that's a fine?
Yeah. Well, I think there was the other interesting point that they kind of started to bring in as well is like if you gain an advantage from the handball, like if it hits your hand and it's
like
not
falls
to your feet, like, oh, it's a handball, but all of a sudden, if it comes off my arm and then goes out for a corner or something, like, oh, it's not a handball. It's just like
now it's like a grey area.
Yeah, again, like it's just such a difficult rule. But yeah, like you said with the sleeve, like again, could I now move my arm like this and it hit there, and that's not handball, but I'm intentionally doing that. So it's a rule that has so much grey area, and for me, it's done by officials who've never played the game or aren't good enough to play the game, and they're calling things that are just so far wrong.
Yeah, okay. What was the one in the Champions League final with Fabinho and they scored from it? It was ruled... Was that offside?
Yeah, I think it was offside. That whole thing was a shame, but I tried to wipe that from my memory anyway, so I don't want to talk about that one.
Yeah, all right. I'll cut it up.
Yeah. So, there we have it, guys. They are the couple of rules that we would like to see changed. Ant's come in with a bit of VAR. I've come in with the handball rule.
Mine's a bit more mainstream. I'm not anti-VAR. I just think it's used...
He's anti-VAR.
No. I'm anti-VAR. I am VAR. No, I just think it's used too much. I'm one of those people who's kind of like watching the game and I'm like, what is going on? Why is this taking so long? If it is taking that long, just leave it. I think I've got the mindset of play the advantage or give them the benefit of the doubt type thing. Let the game flow naturally. Only go back and change it if it is like clear and obvious.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on before, it's almost this myth, but it seems to be true, that if the ref goes to the screen, he's going to overturn his decision.
Yeah, and it's just like everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, like, you see all the players coming out in the interviews and they're on the pitch like, what's going on here? And even like, you're a fan sitting at home watching on TV and you're watching the same thing over and over and over again and you're like...
going into slow-mo.
Yeah, and you're like, you can literally just make whatever opinion now you're getting told to have, because the commentator's like, oh, this could be a foul actually, and you're like, oh, okay, but at the time you never really questioned it, and you should only really overrule it if it's like a 100% consensus. I mean, that's obviously hard to do, but in the past when people have been like marginally offside, or there's been a tackle, or there's been a dive that's like a blatant dive, that should be overruled. But otherwise, like VAR has kind of served its purpose, and you know, we've got these rules in the game that the technology is helping us to judge or stay within. But just it feels like it's getting overused, and now it's kind of having a negative effect.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Well, there we have it. Ant's overruled my decision. He's gone to the screen and decided handball rule not quite up to the standard of the VAR use there. So that's the most important thing that we need to change. Thanks for another good video, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Like, comment,
And subscribe.
there we go. See ya.
See you guys.